Hey guys, Brian at Two Indians here. How y'all doing? We are back with the one and only Mr. Lloyd Greer. How you doing there, buddy?
Hey, Brian, how you doing?
I'm
Good.
doing I'm doing great. I wanted to get you back for round two of our discussion on the new Indian Challenger cams and maybe touch a little bit on a couple other questions. I've had some viewers that have sent me some questions that I want to cover with you on a couple of different topics. My main thing I have to plead ignorance here because I'm not a guy that's deeply involved with what you're doing behind the scenes, right? I mean, I learned a lot last time we talked 2 weeks ago. But what I found out after we got off our call is that when we get a set of Lloyd's cams for the Challenger, the Power Plus 108 motor, we also get another part. And I was hoping maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
I guess I assume that everybody knows everything too. So,
Right.
so I'm a little bit ignorant on getting the information out there for everybody to really know also. But
Sure.
yes, what you get is a billet intake manifold uh, that
Nice.
comes with the cam kit, and
Okay.
it's two pieces to the kit, actually three pieces: front and rear cam, and the billet intake.
Okay.
The reason we need to include this is that the stock one, which is, rubber and has trumpets, we call these tubes trumpets.
Okay.
The the problem with the stock one is that on our dynos, this will only flow enough air to support 127 horsepower, rear wheel horsepower. Will not make any more regardless of the cam, the heads, or the motor size. This is one of our limitations on Challenger. So in order to get to that level that we've been seeing above 127 horsepower, we have had to come up with a manifold. Now, originally, back in the first set of cams that we were running, what we were doing was we were basically cutting the trumpets off the manifold, off the stock manifold, and then
Hmm.
we were going in and hand porting the openings to what we needed and then contouring them to get some airflow and having decent results. The problem, of course, moving forward with that type of scenario is labor intensive, uh,
Sure.
inconsistency in the run in the molds to begin with,
Sure.
and you can see that, or maybe you can see that on the manifold itself, where this one, the front one is kind of straight up and the back one is kind of pointed at an angle. We have two different entries that aren't symmetrical to begin with.
Hmm.
So on our manifold, what we did is basically made both intake parts of the manifold symmetrical. So they're both at the same angle. They're both at the same width cross section. They're mirrored from each other, where this is far from it. You can never duplicate this into this boot. We tried because you'll end up going through parts of the rubber and the walls on certain sections. So we felt that it was a necessary item to actually include this in the kit. And of course, it's billet. Yeah, so it's
Yep. Sure.
pricey to make,
Yeah,
manufacture.
I bet.
But unfortunately, it's cheaper than actually paying for the rubber molds right now to have one rubber molded.
All right. So, to be clear, I guess you're looking at a distribution of the air to the front and back cylinder. Is that correct? Is that why it has that Y shape in it?
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. All right. I
Yep.
was just trying to. Sorry, I'm looking at the camera and you're over here on my monitor.
And matter of fact, the other thing too, and you can see it on this. I think you can see it on this
Okay.
section. You see how this tube diameter is smaller than this tube diameter,
Yeah, I think I do see that. Yeah. Hmm.
front to rear.
Yep.
Well, that's the other problem with the stock manifold is that on each runner, there's actually four different size variations from the start to the finish of it. And of course, one is larger in diameter than the other one. So it really doesn't promote very good consistency on airflow. So
Okay.
there again, the billet manifold. does.
Okay. Is this something that we see on the race bikes?
No. On the race bike, the reason that they had to go with a throttle body that is mounted outside and a single throttle body is because the airflow through the frame can only support approximately 150 rear wheel horsepower. So in order to get and the rules of Moto America were that you can't alter the frame. Of course, frame is airbox
Okay,
combination.
right. Okay.
So therefore, you couldn't alter the frame to get any more airflow into the motor. So
Mhm.
the only way to achieve more airflow was to get it outside of the airbox frame section. And the resulting manner was to go with a common 2-to-1 intake manifold and throttle body. Now,
Mhm.
the original, and ironically, the original throttle bodies, I think there were 75 millimeter throttle bodies. The surface area of the 75 millimeter throttle body, single throttle body, even though it looks like it's this big, is only 0.3 square inches in surface area larger than what the combination of these two was. So it wasn't necessarily bigger, better. It was just, matter of fact, gaining more air from outside source as opposed to trying to get it through the frame itself.
Okay.
So to answer your question, no, this is not at all close to what's on the race bikes.
Okay. All right. Let's talk about the cams now. Do you have a set of the cams there with you?
I do. Yep. You said bring props. I brought
Oh,
props.
yeah.
Camshafts.
All right. You mentioned before that it's a two-piece cam. Is that correct? Or am I mistaken?
The camshaft itself is one piece,
Okay.
but it does have a decompression trigger in it.
Okay.
Of course, the decompression trigger is held in by a small steel pin and set screw, and it has a little bitty spring at the back to kind of offset the counterweight.
Mm-hmm.
But the cam shaft itself is actually just one piece.
So, one of the other questions that we've gotten is, can you give us any of the specs, I guess, the LSA, any of the lift, duration, anything like that?
I can give it,
Okay.
and I'll tell you why I typically don't.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the Victory days, when we started doing cam profiles, I would at first I went to my buddies and I said, okay, I at the time we had two Andrew cam specs, we had some two variances of stock cams, and we had two cams that I was going to come out with. Oh, yeah, we had the S&S cams also, the 495 S&S cams. So I went to my buddies and I said, okay, this is what we're going to build. We're going to build a hot street motor. What cam are we going to put in this bike? So basically, if I give you a catalog like you would Drag Specialties or Andrews,
Mm-hmm.
and you're sitting there and you're just looking at cam specs, which cam are you going to pick?
The one with the biggest number.
Well, unfortunately, that is the problem. Everybody always picks the wrong cam based on looking at specs.
Right.
Why? Because the bottom line is you don't know what works in that motor to begin with.
Okay.
Now, granted, every single one of my buddies could probably recite every small block and big block Chevy cam profile to existence, but it doesn't relate with what we're doing.
Okay.
So as a result, I've always said, I can give you specs, but what are you going to, one, what are you going to do with them? Nothing, absolutely nothing.
Okay.
Two, is it really going to help in the overall picture of building the motor? No, because we're going to offer one street cam, we're going to offer one high performance big bore kit cam, and we're going to offer one race cam. And those get slotted for the means that you're going to use them for, you
Mm-hmm.
know. Um, so that, I'm in a sense, I don't mind giving them out, but the other way it confuses everybody.
Okay.
You just
All
don't
right.
know what works in a motor to begin with. So if you don't know, if you don't have anything to correlate with, well, it's just numbers at that point.
Right.
It's like it would be like handing your wife a voltmeter and telling her go read the battery voltage. She can tell you what the number is, but she don't know what it means.
Right. Does it have a draw on it or not? Right.
Right. So, but yeah, I'm not opposed to it. And the other thing too is when we go in and for the design phases on our cam profiles, one of the things that I've always been really adamant on, and of course, back in the Victory days, very prominent is the intake choice. Whether we had an open style air box like our open air box or the S&S air box or our torque tube intake. Now, granted, on Thunderstroke, it's not as critical because it doesn't really matter what you bolt to the end of that throttle body. As long as the airflow filter or the flow of the air filter is sufficient, you end up with about the same power levels. But on Challenger, we're back to quote unquote those Victory days where manifold is absolutely critical on the ability to make power. So therefore, our opening on our intake events is designed to work with this type of manifold setup.
Okay. So tell me a little bit about the power profile. Like I've heard or read online so many different things. People have said on these new cams that all the power is in the top end, or there's no power in the middle end, and then somebody else says the exact opposite. What would you say to that?
So, as a rule of thumb, anybody is hard pressed, if not super unattainable, to beat stock torque levels down low.
Okay.
So I have this thing that I never like to sacrifice low speed power for top end gain. With that, because we've got street motors, torque is what moves us. Torque is what's nice at low speed.
Yep.
But there's a certain amount of error, I guess, or sacrifice that is needed to have this effect, the balancing effect of where your power is going to be. Absolutely. We're always going to see a huge top end increase with a performance cam on top end. My goal is that I try not to lose any more than stock power levels down low. So unless you increase compression, increase engine size, or increase timing, it's very hard to get higher than stock torque levels down low. So yes, we have the ability to increase compression. Yes, we have the ability to increase engine size. Not really do we have the ability to increase any more timing because of the fact that we've got a decent compression ratio to start with. Mm-hmm. We end up with getting into pre-ignition. So those three things, ignition, compression, and engine size, are typically gains that by increasing them, you can see linear improvements across the board. Well, if we're working with the stock 108 motor, and we're not increasing the compression and we're not increasing engine size, and we can't really increase the advance on the ignition, well, our sacrifices are, let's at least maintain low and mid power levels with stock. Okay. And so far with, I would say, probably 85% of the exhausts that we've tested so far, we can at least maintain stock low-end power levels. 2-in-1s we've been seeing on with these cams to have a significant gain on our torque across the board over, say, a true dual setup. And that's part of the combination battle that we also have too, because exhaust is super critical of working with the cam. And if ideally you could have a cam profile that works and is suited for every single exhaust system out there, but of course that's almost impossible to manufacture.
Right. It's a custom cam for everybody. Right. You can't do that.
Right. So also moving forward, I am sure that we are absolutely going to see some upset and disappointed individuals that have an exhaust system that just is not going to work with cams. Like I say, so far, 85% of the exhausts we've had are working really well. And there's, geez, maybe one or two in my head that just didn't seem to perform very well. You
Okay.
know,
So you mentioned that a 2-into-1 system, or I guess in the case of stock, which I guess you'd call a 2-into-1 into two, right? Because it goes into the collector
right,
box, right?
right.
Um, it sounds to me like those would be your optimal type systems. What would be the worst? I guess if that's the best, then just the opposite would probably be the worst, like
So,
open headers or something, right?
yeah, the worst combination that we've seen is a bike that has the stock head pipe that's
Uh,
running the slip-ons. So a slip-on that's just way too open, not enough baffling in it with a
okay.
cat delete.
Okay.
That so far has been not the ideal setup. And it goes back to this too. I think I've been preaching the three things on exhausts for years: performance, appearance, and sound. Pick two out of three and be happy. It's always a compromise scenario. So
Okay.
if you've got an exhaust that you absolutely love the sound, you
Right.
love the look, but you know what? It just didn't come up on the numbers like we were expecting. Hey, it's still a win. Two out of three.
All right, so I think that about covers it on the Challenger cams. Of course, there may still be a slot available open for Sturgis, which I can't believe it is a week and a half away, right? And we have an appointment to see you. I just gave my deposit to the girl on the phone. And again, to touch base on what we talked about last week, that if you can't make it to Sturgis to get the cams there, what's the best way to get set up with an appointment to get the cams installed?
We do have a great dealer network
Mm-hmm.
across the country. I would suggest contacting your dealer, seeing if they're set up to be a Lloyd's Motorworks parts supplier,
Okay.
and get with them. We of course we have our shops in the Twin Cities, but there's definitely a lot of capable dealers out there that want to perform the work and get some business themselves.
Awesome. Awesome. Now, is there a website online that lists all those dealers that would have that ability that could get all that product?
Good question, Brian. Because not right now,
Okay.
because some dealers that are selling our product or even that are remote tuning centers or LTLs for us don't always have, say a tech capable of performing a high level end job of this nature.
Okay.
Uh, some of them don't want to, you know.
Right. Yeah.
So
Understood.
it all depends. I would just say reach out to your local dealer and ask them the questions.
Okay. Cool.
In the process too, I guess I want to bring up one other point. We touched on exhaust as being a critical factor, and of course, not only power levels, but everything else as far as sound and looks. Challenger is a very airflow restricted machine. And one of the things to start with was the stock intake manifold assembly. The other thing, of course, is the air filter. And when you're doing cams, we also recommend that you replace your stock air filter with either the K&N or the S&S style air filter. And we also see typically a 4 to 5 horsepower gain if you have an additional stage 1 intake on it. Also, this air filter is really too small to get to the power levels that we want to do. So we are in the process of redesigning a replacement
Okay.
that will have sufficient airflow with that, because in a sense, I mean, to me, I don't like to spend 550 on a stage 1 air cleaner and still have to spend, I forget what this is. I don't know if it's 60, 80 bucks, 100 bucks,
Yeah. It's
whatever,
about $80 these days. Yep.
to get that also. So you end up having to spend $600+ to try to maximize our airflow, when I think that we can do it in a lot simpler of a manner. Overcome the 3.5 year hurdle of the cam situation. Now we can take our efforts and put it more on the other aspects of the intake system.
Okay. All right. Another question that somebody had was, is there anything coming up for the Thunderstroke motors?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Oh, really?
and you know there's gonna be stuff coming out all the time. This year I'm actually swapping out my well, I'll keep my Challenger, but I'm going back to a Chieftain Elite. And people ask me why. And there's two primarily reasons. One, I'm 5'9", so ideally the Chieftain does fit me a little bit better ergonomically. But the
Mm-hmm.
other thing is I love torque. And when you bolt a 131 on a Thunderstroke, you've got over 150 foot-pounds of torque at the twist of your wrist. Man, it's
Right,
just awesome, you know?
right.
So with that, we've got a new set of cams out, 605s that were primarily designed for, our big bore kits. And I'm not going to say that there's not going to be guys using it on applications that they
116s. Yeah.
probably shouldn't, but nonetheless, um, I've also been working on intakes for Thunderstroke, and I've yet to perfect it, but I have an intake where I've seen 170 foot-pounds of torque out of a 126
Out of a 126. Okay.
with this intake.
Wow.
I mean, and to
That,
ride a bike like that is just phenomenal. So,
that's unbelievable.
oh yeah, the motor definitely has a lot more potential, and we're going to keep finding it as we go along. Just unfortunately, efforts like Challenger really sideline a tremendous amount of time and effort
Right.
to get to those cams. So,
Well, being that
but
you guys are tearing it up in the VRL league, I guess some of that is working its way into your performance setups.
right, I mean,
Performance
one way to
problems.
test a product is throw it on the racetrack, right?
Right. Exactly.
So,
Yep.
yeah, we did that last weekend before BRL, and
Yep. Yeah, you guys are killing it out there again.
again,
Yes. Very good. Oh, one last question.
yeah.
Have you heard anything at all about the 23 ECUs, the Bosch ECUs? Anybody getting close to cracking those?
The only thing I seen was what I don't even want to mispronounce his name. The French guy put up Pierre last week about it being totally unprogrammable. Having heard that, we went and I made some calls, and we're actually looking at some different directions.
Huh.
So,
Okay. Well, stay tuned for that. That's for sure, huh?
so I guess that would be a kind of a news flash if the programming side is incapable. To me, there's no can't. There's just a different road you need to take to get
Right.
there.
Right.
So we actually have some of that uh, direction going right now. If at all it is possible that it can't be programmed, we'll have a solution for it.
Okay. Right. Well, that's I'm sure everybody, not only in the Indian and Polaris world, but anybody that has, one of these Bosch ECUs, I'm certain is not going to be happy to hear that it sounds uncrackable, but I'm sure that everybody else is looking at workarounds. So
Yeah, especially on
hopefully
the
that works.
automotive side of it. You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
that's where the big money and the big benefits come from. We're just crumbs in that
Yep.
industry. We get their benefits of them hacking the systems.
All right. Well, Lloyd, I want to thank you for taking some time to sit with us today. And I
Yep, no
look forward
problem.
to
Thanks for
seeing
having
you.
me.
Yep. I look forward to seeing you out in Sturgis. And hopefully we'll grab a beer or something.
Absolutely.
All right, buddy. Thanks
Sounds
again.
good. Have a good
Uh-huh.
day.
All right. Bye-bye.